Hey there folks, today I want to talk about Wild Hearts again. I was hoping for a few updates from the devs to see if they had fixed a lot of the issues with the game before I kind of made this video, but I figured the time is right. So today we're going to be discussing Wild Hearts and all the problems I personally have with this game. Now I do want to preface this by saying this is not a hit piece against the game or the dev team at all. I really enjoy Wild Hearts quite a bit. I've put over 200 hours into the game already, and it's only been out for like 7 weeks or something. So I definitely put my fair share of hours into it, and I can't say I hate the game if I dump that much time into it. So I think Wild Hearts is good, but that's very anecdotal since other people's experiences vary drastically. It has received very mixed reviews, and it's definitely not the Monster Hunter Slayer game that people made it out to be. So despite really enjoying Wild Hearts myself, I have a lot of gripes with the game, and I kind of want to discuss them and what I feel personally needs to change to make Wild Hearts a truly amazing game. Of course, the first thing that literally anyone is going to ask about Wild Hearts is the performance. Every single patch, people come and say, is it fixed yet? Is it fixed yet? Is it fixed yet? Which is reasonable because, as everyone knows, the performance for Wild Hearts has been shaky at best. Everyone has had differing levels of playability, from downright not being able to play it to those who run it at 10 FPS, or people like myself where it runs at 60 frames, but I still get dips here and there. It's crazy and honestly pretty unacceptable that the game runs as poorly as it does, and it's not even a PC exclusive issue. There's tons of frame rate and graphical problems on the PS5 and the Xbox whatever as well. It's easily the biggest turnoff for the game for most people right now, because frame dips and spikes completely kill any immersion, pacing, and enjoyment of any video game. Even more so in these action-packed games that really need tight input control and reading enemy movements to play. So as of right now, while I'm recording this, there was a performance patch, a patch specifically for the performance fixes. That was on the 27th. And of course, the question that everyone keeps asking me, is it fixed now? Well, I don't know. No one does. The game still plays wildly different from person to person. I personally saw almost no change between this current update and not, and I still can't really get past 60 frames, and it dips to the high 40s from time to time during some fights in some areas. So yeah, that's not good. But the game has pretty much always ran like that for me, so I haven't seen any changes. Now obviously that's not the right answer, because after so many patches that they've had specifically aiming at the performance, you'd think it would work great right now. And I'm kind of giving up hope that it's ever going to be outstanding performance. I feel like this is just kind of how it's going to be. But this is the first thing that should be priority number one that gets fixed for any game really. Next, I'm going to continue on with another little system issue before we dive into the meat of the game, and I'm going to make this one short because I already put a video out on it, but I feel like the field of view slider needs to be a thing. I don't know why it's not in the game. The default camera angle view is so narrow that you really can't see much in the game, and the Kemono are also huge and often jump, burrow, and charge past you, and with this narrow camera angle, it makes playing the game way more difficult than it needs to be, because you just lose sight of monsters all the time. There is a cheat engine table that lets you adjust the field of view, which I've been using for 3 weeks now. Honestly, I can't go back. With the field of view, I can actually see jump attacks from monsters like Golden Tempest, Lavaback, and Amaterasu, so I can actually dodge these attacks now, which has been a godsend. No more trying to guess audio cues for when those are going to land. It really is just a feature that should have been in the game by default, since most games have it. And it kind of is in the game, it's just not accessible by players normally. So that would be another issue I'd want to see fixed right away. Easy fix. Let's get into some real meat and potatoes though, and start with the Karakuri. Admittedly, I like the Karakuri way more than I imagined I would have. It was one of those features that everyone saw in the trailers and we all collectively thought, I don't know man, looks kind of Fortnite-y, and everyone was just kind of not into it. Though after getting used to it, and even on mouse and keyboard, I've grown to really like the Karakuri system because it's very well blended into everything that you do in the game, and it feels very natural when it works. Because of course, it doesn't always want to work. And it's really frustrating because it is the core feature of the game, and again, it's blended into everything that you do. So what's wrong with it? Well, I dislike that you don't regenerate your thread when you load maps or quick quests, so a lot of the times you need to go out and collect thread whenever you start a new hunt because you just forget. Minor gripe, but it is annoying. Next is that Karakuri crafting when you're moving is always starting below the player, which I kinda sorta understand because it's for the players to use the springboard and auto launch off that, since it'll be basically on top of you. But the problem is that literally every other Karakuri doesn't want to be directly on top of the player. So if you need to craft something in the middle of a fight, you need to stop attacking and wait for the crafting preview box to move over in front of the player, which is super annoying when you get to the late game fights like deeply volatile monsters, since they attack relentlessly fast and never stop, and you need to quickly build a spring wall or a barricade or something like that, and you have to stop and wait for the preview to get out from under you, and then often just leads to death. Adding on to the fusion Karakuri topic, I also don't like that it seems to be kind of tied with your frame rate, in that if you try to craft something really fast and you get like a frame spike, the actual input for crafting a Karakuri doesn't come out, which leads to like, misshapen, fusion Karakuri. Like you'll have like 2 out of the 3 boxes spawn, or maybe you have like 4 out of the 5, and they don't always seem to come out if you try to build fast, which is a shame because you really have to in some of these fights. And so it's kind of like another process that's just fighting against you. The way you stack Karakuri can be very finicky if you're trying to like craft near a rock or on a slope, or because there's some invisible blocking terrain, something. It's always preventing you from finishing your crafts. And again, when you're in the middle of a hard fight, you lose like that much time trying to build stuff, and then you lose your safety, and you're just trying to figure out where you can craft, and it's a huge mess in the middle of combat. And I don't see why this wasn't like an issue that was found out beforehand, because it's literally everyone's gripe when they do these fights, is that they build, 3 out of the 6 fusion Karakuri boxes that they needed, and then it goes, oh, you can't build here. Like, cool, then why did you even let me start? Anyone who's played the game past like chapter 3 knows what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Lurid Soulstalker's area is also notoriously bad for this, as you just can't craft in some spots. You also can't craft anything at like an angle, because the Karakuri just decides on its own where it wants to snap and stick to or not, so you need to make sure your camera is directly facing at what you're trying to craft, which is kind of annoying if you're trying to keep an eye on a monster in a fight. Karakuri is very fun when it works, but it's very frustrating when it doesn't, which unfortunately is a sentiment shared with most of the game's systems at this point. So I personally would love to see the Karakuri system tightened up a bit, make it snappier. I don't know what they could do, just it doesn't really play well right now. I love it, but the environment is getting in the way. Adding on to the Karakuri system, the Dragon Karakuri, which is the permanent craftable ones on the maps, are probably my favorite feature of the game, because they do let players customize their route to all the areas in the maps and set up fast travel locations wherever they want. But of course, it doesn't always work. Many times monsters will break down your Dragon Karakuri, which will fix itself, which is nice, but they don't always seem to come back properly or in the same spot exactly. Like Dragon Vines, the zipline Karakuri, will shoot their tether in a different spot than you had originally shot it, and then you don't realize till you're on it, and you're like, oh well, I gotta go fix that, and then you never do. I also wish there was a feature that would allow you to reset a map and remove all placed Karakuri, Dragon and regular, because all the normal Karakuri on your map stays forever, and I think there's a limit to like 200 pieces before they start to override each other, but it's a lot. And it's kind of messy because as you play the game more and more, your maps just become littered with failed crafting attempts and random boxes all over the place. So if we had like an easy way to just delete all the Karakuri on the map, that would clean things up a lot. There's also a ton of permanent Dragon Karakuri you can place, which would take forever to go out and manually destroy each one. So again, I would like a button that just said, hey, clear all Dragon Karakuri. It would make me so much happier as I could set them back up in more optimal positions without having to spend an hour and a half going out and breaking them all down first, which I'm neglecting to do right now. So that is the feature I would like to see added just to make things a bit nicer for the player. So for the Karakuri in general, it's cool, but it's inconsistent, and this is a big contention for the player base, as it is such an integral part of the game. It feels like you're actively fighting against the Karakuri crafting more than the monsters at times, because failing to craft is what's getting you hit, not necessarily the monster's attacks. So again, I would love to just see this whole thing polished up and fixed going forward, which might seem like a big duh, but like it hasn't happened yet, so yeah, just something I would like. Moving on to another topic that I'm unfortunately too familiar with, the food and cooking system. God damn, does it suck so hard in Wild Hearts, and I don't know why. Like, okay, it's not all that bad. I do like that food isn't consumed if you die on a quest, and you get to keep food buffs between logouts, and it's really only used after you finish a hunt, so that's cool. But making food, wow. Like, why is it so brutally slow and tedious? Again, I had done a video on this, already discussing and breaking down how the food system works, so I'm going to try to make this short. What I really want to hammer home is that it just takes way too long to stockpile food. When I try to dry some meat, I need like 12 pieces of meat to get 3 back. Why do I need 7 drying racks on every map to start drying food? Why does the smoker only smoke 1 piece of food at a time? And it takes forever to process too. It's actually like time, not like, yeah, go out and do a quest and it'll be done when you get back. It takes like 10 actual minutes to cook 1 item. It's crazy. So again, like the drying racks, you need to stockpile 40 smokers to be cooking all the time. And every stage of the food process gives you less and less output on your food, so getting like one spicy smoked meat, you need like 20 other pieces of meat. It's just a very slow system for seemingly no reason. Every player that wants to use good food has to set up like these giant cooking camps on every single map and constantly bounce between them because nothing is shared across the maps, not even the storage chests. It's just unnecessarily tedious, and I wish the output for cooking were equal to the inputs. That's all. It would make a lot of players, myself included, much happier, I'm sure. It's not like food is breaking the game anyway. Heck, it's basically mandatory to survive a hit on the deeply volatile mons anyway, so just make it easier on the players. Make me want to cook. Alright, food aside, let's start talking about the gear. And I'm going to start with the weapons. I actually like most of the weapons playstyles in Wild Hearts. Heck, I'm even playing Katana, which is a ranged weapon, but still. The problem I have with the weapons is split into just a few different parts. So, the first part is that all weapons have the same basic formula. Hit a monster to build a meter, expend the meter. It's overly simplified, I'm sure, but that's basically how every weapon in the game feels and how they operate. So you're more often than not using whatever gets you the most of what your weapon needs to do the big final attack, and then it's rinse and repeat from there. That's your whole gameplay loop. There's a lot of different attacks and such for each weapon's kit, but I feel like half the kits are neglected in favor of just shortcutting to the super attack. And this is an issue with the weapon's motion values mostly being stacked onto those super moves. Like a katana hits for 10 damage, but the unsheathed mode swings for double the amount of hits and 40 damage a hit. It's insanely outweighing the normal weapon usage. And because of this, you always want to do whatever you can to build the most meter and get into your super ASAP, and nothing else really matters. When you craft your katana, you're only going to be looking at either shortening how long it takes to get the meter or increase the time you have in the meter. And this is fine mechanically, but when it's the only option and the only thing you should be doing and neglecting basically everything else in the weapon's kit and crafting tree, it feels kind of forced. And the same goes for other weapons like Cannon, who literally has all of its damage with the laser, but you have to do like 5 things before you can use the laser, and basically you do no damage until that point. So you're only trying to use the laser. The jump shots, the mortar spam, auto fire, all worthless. If they all did 1 damage but made the laser faster and easier to use, everyone would take that in a heartbeat. So like, I like the weapon designs, I just wish the weapons weren't forced into super spam to be efficient, and I would like to see motion values of attacks rebalanced to make them more enticing to use. Next thing on the weapon discussion is the weapon trees. I like the weapon crafting system in this game. It's actually really cool and it's fun to plan your final product and move skills down the tree. I like it. The issue I have with this though is that 1, we're forced to always use the bottom trees because they have the most raw or element, and so that's always the best decision. It's really the guiding factor, which really means that we only have 2 or 3 usable weapons for each class. Kinda lame. And 2 is that we're leaving a lot of potentially fun builds and skills behind because they have skills that are stuck on the inherent skills of weapons with lower raw, and we can't bring those down at all. And so we'll never see these things used, which is quite a shame. Smaller gripe, but not being able to overwrite the first inherited skill of whatever you're trying to land on is also annoying, because that means we're also forced to use only 4 skills of what we want, because the good weapon that we're trying to land on just has a skill and we can't touch it regardless if it's good or bad or if we even wanted it. The last thing with the weapon system, it feels like every weapon just wants skills to fix their clunkiness or reach that super faster. Rather than pass down attacks or utility skills, everyone is passing down skills to make the weapon feel playable. Like Bow needs all the stamina recovery skills it can get, it needs speed shooter so bolster 1 isn't slow, and it needs knocking marvel so you can actually bolster at a reasonable pace without getting hit. And that's all the skills you can move, that's everything. Cannon just wants more laser, so basically everything for heat management is the only thing you're going to see on cannons. Umbrella just stacks iframes on the parries and stuff so you can actually use the weapon and stuff like that. Like, it just feels kind of bad rather than try to like change our playstyle or add crit stacking or wither with elements or other weird stuff. We're just trying to fix the weapons, and that's kind of boring. So again, small tweaks could be made to the weapon forging system. I would like to be able to pass down at least 1 inherent skill as we traveled and craft weapons, as well as being able to overwrite the inherited skill from weapons as we forge our tree. Both should be easy enough to implement, and it would be a simple change that could affect all our builds in the future. Like, what's there really to lose? Moving on to the armor. Now, before Grimstalker showed up, pretty much all the armor was bad, except for like Ember Plume and Celestial Dragon, and then like an odd piece here or there. Now Grimstalker armor has shaken that up, but we still have a problem with that most armor sets are useless or lacking any identity. There's nothing to build around for armors. Most of the effects of armors are low valued, they have low uptime, or just low activation frequency. Like, let's take a look at the Cobalt Monkey face here really quick. It has Mortality Water, Grabmaster, and Bridge Burning. Mortality Water says we get 10% increased attack when we use the Healing Water, but also get poisoned. Cool. Grabmaster says it reduces some stamina loss when we grab onto the monster, or similar. Not related, but what does that even mean? What else is similar? Whatever. Bridge Burning is a 15% attack boost and defense boost with waning health. What is waning health? I had to actually Google it, and Google says decreasing. So I thought it was like, okay, cool, while I'm losing health, like being poisoned or on fire, I get increased attack and defense. Oh, this helm also poisons me when I heal. Great, this should be awesome, they should work together. Except it's not, and no they don't. The Mortality Water buff lasts about 10 seconds after you drink, and 10 seconds of 10% increased damage is kind of bad in my opinion. And the poison also only lasts a few seconds before it gets cured. But the waning health on Bridge Burning means that when I'm down to the last 10% of my health, so they don't actually work together at all. The only use I can see for the Mortality Water is to drink enough to get into Bridge Burning range, so the 10% attack that it would provide is relatively useless, and it's easier just to eat a hit than spam drinks and wait. And the rest of the armor set also has nothing to do with these skills, like freeze recovery, okay, ukemi art, what does that even mean? Reduce injury after being thrown, like damage reduction for X seconds after a pin throw, a knockback, like, I mean, I know what it does now because I had to look it up and talk about it, but how are other players supposed to figure out what it does? Pummel Booster increases the power of pummel attacks. Did you know this is a multiplicative modifier while other attack boosting skills are additive? No, how could you? There are words that say like attack power or power of attacks and damage, and they all behave and calculate differently because, of course, the wording of everything is terrible, and that's something that I really want to get changed. I kind of slipped into that topic. That wasn't what I was going to talk about, but the wording is terrible in this game. Moving on, the other armor pieces here on this monkey set are like Tangle Recovery. Have you ever been tangled? I didn't think so. One Stroke Fury and Crit are both active when you break apart, which is cool, but the buff only lasts like 12 seconds. So you get it for like one combo if you're lucky, and that's it. And because there are a limited amount of parts you can break, eventually the skill just doesn't help. Core Booster Stamina, okay, and Resurrection, which is actually going to let you eat a hit once that would kill you, which makes sense with the helmet, but this is the only piece that relates to the rest of the set. I don't know like what this whole set is doing. I know this went for a while talking about this one set, but this is how it is for like every single armor set. They're full of skills that don't mesh well, they don't describe what they're really doing, don't provide anything useful for the players, or just like, what are we supposed to do with these? Like, they're so uninspired that people just don't care for the armors in this game. And then on top of that, you can't upgrade armors defenses of like the lower armors to match like the higher end armors. And so with that, we can see why we just ignore 90% of the armors at this point. They're just boring and useless. And speaking of useless, let's talk about the human and Kemono path modifications. Now, I had much higher hopes for these. I thought we could get different skills added to our armors by adding modifications to them. That's not the case. The only thing that changes is that we get some more defense and move our path bar at the bottom, which only activates skills on armors. Plus, we have armors that have skills with both paths on them, so it's like, cool, we can only use one, so we're effectively down one skill in this armor piece. The system probably wouldn't feel so bad if the human path was halfway decent, but it's so much worse than Kemono. The only thing human has going for it is Verve, which is their peak performance, but its values are also just worse than Desperation on Kemono's side, and they're both skills that require you to not get hit. So yeah, like I'm just not seeing a point of going human side. Kemono also has Earplugs, which is the best skill in the game hands down, and overall just far more useful skills in general. I don't want to go over them, but basically everyone plays full Kemono path, and I wish we had better skills on armors to make us actually pick different styles and paths. And I know we're going to get a new modification system on the 6th, which is soon. That'd be cool, hopefully, but I can't pass judgment on that until I see it. Tacking onto this is the Talisman system in Wild Hearts, which I find atrociously bad. Talismans by design are cool. We can have essentially any skill in the game on them, and we can equip up to 5 of them with a maximum point value of 50. Simple enough. I even like that we can target farm for talismans based on monster properties, so that's really cool too. What I don't like is that weapon skills on talismans only come from visitor requests, which are hard limited every day, and they fix the exploit to farm them, and 99% of those are terrible. That and talismans in general have such low values that it's hard to get excited to farm for them, like woohoo 1% more attack or +1 defense. And that's not to say that all talismans are bad, there are some good ones out there that you can stack since you can equip 5 of them, but you're often going to sift through so much garbage first to find something useful. But even then, when you find a good talisman, it doesn't change much for you. Like, what is it, 5% more attack power on something? I mean, woohoo, I guess, but will you actually notice that in a fight? Probably not. Deeply volatile monsters are a good example for this. You have to farm currency from volatile monsters to fight the deeply volatile monsters who are hard, and they actually give you a talisman. But the talismans can be so widely different in power, from being worse than what you can target farm normally to being slightly better. So most of the time you're going to work really hard to fight these things and then get rewarded with a bad talisman. Like, who wants a talisman with bolster, slash, and pummel? Like, it literally does not work. Or like a health boost 1, defense boost 1 from a deeply volatile monster. Come on. And because the talisman system is limiting you on both a point cost for the talisman as well as a hard limit of 5, you're kind of screwed one way or the other. The good talismans cost 20 or more, so you can't even use that many of those, and you can't use a lot of the bad ones since you're limited to 5. I feel like the system is working against you on both sides. If we only had one of the limitations, it would feel so much better for everyone. Like, with 5 total talismans, we can actually stack a lot of good weapon skill talismans and other ones that cost like 20 points, and that would free up a lot of space on our weapons to branch out there. Or if we had just the 50 point limit, we can use like 10 single skill talismans and not waste points on secondary skills we don't actually want. This would let us focus our talismans much better. We could then also use a mix of large useful talismans and a bunch of like lesser ones. Right now, I just don't like the talisman grind because the limitations of the system are forcing me to get talismans with 2 skills that I actively want, which is rare, and I gotta make sure I get as close to 50 points as possible while still having 5 active talismans. It's just kind of a mess right now, and it makes me not want to farm them or bother to farm since it makes such a little difference anyway. I would recommend changing the system limitations one way or the other. Take one of the restrictions off and I would be much happier. I'm sure most people would as well. Now lastly, I want to talk about the kimonos themselves. Again, I love Wild Hearts, and the kimono are a big part of that, partially because their designs are so great, but also their fights are very, very fun when you learn them and can be quite challenging. But there are a couple of factors that really take away from the experience and overall enjoyment of the fights, which is another huge part of the game as a whole. First is obviously, everyone's going to talk about it, the transitions. Kemono move zones way too much. It seems like they move about every 20% HP loss, maybe 30%, seems that way. And if you do a bunch of damage in like one zone, they often move 2 or 3 times because of it, forcing you to chase a monster down across the entire map. Sometimes end up chasing monsters more than actually fighting them, and that just is never a good sign. Especially because when you try to stop them from changing zones, like putting down a trap or something, and they just decide to sidestep that trap and leave, it's a big middle finger to the player, and you just have to spend the next minute and a half trying to catch up. And monsters limp away absurdly fast, like they must have ripped that right out of Iceborne. Because you get like 3 seconds to see a monster start its limp, and then it just rockets off at blistering speeds. That really looks unnatural since they're supposed to be weakened and limping because of the injuries, and it's just not fun. So everything about it is just annoying. Deeply volatile monsters don't move zones, and it's actually one of the reasons why they're probably the best fights in the game, at least in my opinion, is you can have a real throwdown with them. But honestly, I would be okay if volatiles moved zones like once and then kind of corrupted them along the way. That'd be a cool little thing, right? But for this aspect of the game, all I want to really see changed is that monsters transition on a timer after engagement rather than an HP percentage, and maybe they can only change zones once until a limp, so you have like at most 2 transitions, and at best 0 if you can kill them before that timer. Just a thought. Another aspect of the Kemono that I rather don't like is the parts system. Every single monster has the same weak spots and hard spots. Tail and head are weak, everything else is hard. It's boring and makes tackling monsters the exact same. I don't see why some monsters couldn't have like creative parts be weaker than others. Like Lavaback's back and arms when enraged being molted, now they're softer, right? Make them a weak spot, they're still not a weak spot. I don't know, it just feels weird that there's no real difference in weak spots. It's always the face, and then it's always the tail unless you're like Grithog or something. But adding on to that, like even elemental weaknesses are also really weird because no one has any idea how elemental damage works. So we can't figure out the star rating system since a 3-star weakness seems fairly decent for elemental, but a 3-star for parts is actually really bad. So like, do we only want to do 4 stars? Like what's up with that? There's only one 5-star. The body parts also have super weird magneting for attacks, like trying to attack a monster's face or tail is incredibly inconsistent for most weapons. Even cannon, which feels like it should be not the case, with a little dot, you just have to touch a monster with it. But when you try to hit the head, you'll see white numbers, like you hit a shoulder or a back or a neck or something else that just isn't the head. And the same goes for the tail. Like the registration for stuff feels super wonky. Like I try to hit the weak spots as much as I can, but I really stopped trying to optimize anything because it's just so random. Now I just aim for that general direction and hope it registers as weak spot damage. And I can't be the only one that's thinking this either. Like trying to hit Lavaback's face or Grimstalker's face It's just getting on my nerves sometimes. So it's just one of those things that really deflate my enjoyment of the game because it feels like the game's just fighting me on every step. And lastly, I want to discuss the content updates because that's where we're getting to. I'm really happy that Wild Hearts is getting constant patches and updates. Really, that's awesome. Hellfire Lahar back was a crazy fight. Grimstalker's armors and weapons are awesome, truly. But I feel like new content won't bring people to this game or keep people playing it. What players want are fixes, especially to performance, which does take time, I know, but no one's coming back until that's fixed, number one. Then the other main issue I see people quitting is because the replayability isn't there. Talisman farming is not fun. Armors are boring. Weapon trees are boring. There's nothing keeping players hooked on that grind because everyone's doing the exact same thing. So while more content seems like a good idea, I think fixing the systems currently in place would do far more good than just adding on, an extra set of armor or weapons on top every, 6 weeks. Even if the weapons and armors are the new hotness, you're still leaving behind 90% of the content in the game already. So while I am excited to fight the new Kemono, I can't help but just wish there were just adjustments made to the base game and its system first, then add all that good stuff on after, like when all the systems get polished up. I do really enjoy Wild Hearts and I want to see this game succeed, so I feel like some criticism needs to be voiced. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all for listening if you made it this far. I don't typically do opinion pieces because who the hell cares what I think, right? But I really want this game to do well, and I just see so much potential, so I feel like I really have to voice these things now. But again, thanks, and thank you to my Patreon members, mucho apreciado. If anyone wants to talk shop about Wild Hearts or gaming in general, feel free to join my Discord in the description below. But yeah, thanks and good luck out there, hunters. Peace.